So, this is the story of two people. One of them is someone I know, and one of them is me. I will start with the someone I know first, and then I will do me afterward. But basically, this is financial setup. So, when uh, she was born, the person that I know, she had basically been born with a silver spoon. She didn't realize it for the most part until she got older, but she grew up having a personal nanny. She grew up having a maid. She grew up in a three-story uh, building in the upper class areas north of Chicago, up right by the Great Lakes. She didn't have waterfront property, but she had the property directly behind the waterfront property, so she could walk up to the waterfront anytime she wanted to. She grew up with parents who, at a very young age, gave her stuff like a $30,000 violin to learn violin with, or um, had, perfect education entry from being a toddler. She had uh, parents who were both lawyers, and she grew up in a house where she knew she wasn't allowed to like break things because her parents collected Tiffany lamps and fine art. So she grew up in a very stable financially environment, and on top of that, her parents set her up with somewhat of an understanding that that's the lifestyle that she could continue to have for herself as an adult. They set her up with the understanding that financially they had worked really hard to set up their three daughters with a chance at a really significant life later on. They set her up understanding that if she was nice to certain people, they would give her money. If she called her grandparents on certain times, they might give her some money. That if she networked with other people at like band camp and stuff like that, that could someday be someone she could turn to. So when she got to college, her parents, as they did for all three of their kids, completely 100% paid for everything for college. Um, she unfortunately had a little bit of some crisis. Um, she emotionally, socially felt a lot of pressure. And she felt the pressure not just to make good grades, but also to present herself to a certain standard. And she didn't feel like she was necessarily being honest. She felt like that was being fake. And she didn't agree with every single thing that her parents had raised her to believe. For instance, her parents um, do not like poor people at all. They think poor people are beneath them, and she doesn't agree with that. So there were some things where she basically ended up having a confrontation with her parents, but realized she couldn't actually because they were paying for all of her college and she didn't want to have student debt. So as soon as she graduated, she stepped back from her parents just a little bit and started to try to establish her own life. And she was so motivated to do this that she graduated with honors from a very hard to get honors in college. It was a university. And she also graduated with a job already, which 50% of the students didn't have already a job waiting for them. So she really propelled herself into success. And a lot of that was her parents teaching her about finances pretty young. And she already had a checking account. She already understood about, budgeting and stuff like that. They, had her go ahead and get a CPA. Um, but part of that was also her own motivation to prove to her parents that you could be wealthy, but also not disregard poor people. And she had a more high moral standard, I would say, than her parents. But she went in and out of college walked into a more than six-figure job. Um, so it was six figures, but it was more than 100,000. Um, she stepped into her job and she did pretty good and all that kind of stuff, got her experience, things like that. But she also started her 401k, started her own Roth IRA, stuff like that, and started putting her money in. She knew without a hesitation to cap her businesses that she worked for's contribution to her 401k. She was very surprised to find that most of the other workers who had just started working alongside of her from other places, that they were not maxing their 401 contributions. She was like, why wouldn't you be doing that? um she was very confused by some of these things. So she worked her way up into stuff and she did really well, and she eventually got laid off because she works in the tech industry, and she is set up to bounce back really well. For one thing, when she went to college, she had a fascination with AI, and AI seems to be where tech stuff is going. So kudos to her on knowing something about it. A lot of the tech folks who've been doing coding and stuff who don't have any experience with AI are struggling a little more than her. She's getting offers from all of the top tech companies, period. So she's going to be fine. But she still got really, really distraught when the layoff happened. And she didn't get fired. She got laid off with several other people. And she still took it really to heart and was really disappointed in herself, took a real blow to her confidence. But in reality, she wasn't just set up to bounce back as far as her education and her experience goes. She was set up to bounce back in that she had an emergency fund high enough that she was going to be fine. She got a severance high enough that she'll be fine. She knew how to apply for unemployment. She knew how to do accessing her, different accounts. And quite frankly, uh, her mom set her up financially for some other good things. Um, she was aware of, but didn't really know the extent of, that her mom had started putting money into an account for her as soon as she had started working. Her mom made her get a job when she was 16 years old, and it was a stupid little job for like 3 months in the summer at a fair. And it was a horrible job. She hated the job. But because she had worked and gained some sort of an income, her mom was able to set up an account for her, uh, for a money market account or brokerage account or whatever it is, and start putting money into it and doing investments for her kid. And she apparently made each one of her kids do this. Now, they didn't get an actual job ever again after the little short summer job when they were 16 until after they would graduate. So she had them get this little ittle piddle job just to reinforce to them that they didn't want to work that way, that they wanted to have a high paying, low stress salary wage instead of hourly wage, but also so that she could set up an account for them. So at 16, she started accounts for them. This girl is 25 years old, and she has in the investment account her mom started when she was 16 more than 300 grand toward her retirement. And technically, she could access that money in an emergency. She is set up financially for success. She's set up financially for success by her parents. She's set up successfully for her education, from her job experience, from the way that investments and financial savvy has been taught to her, that she understands networking. When she got laid off, within 15 minutes of being laid off, after she had her initial cry, despite the fact that she's been depressed, despite the fact that she had a confidence blow, this girl started networking instantly, started asking for recommendations, people to link with her on LinkedIn, people to get in contact with her about any places that are hiring. She started talking back and forth with multiple people, and she made sure that she was getting set up for the next job, like almost instantaneously. Her parents and her education and her finances were all set up in a way where she has a goal of retiring early, and it is completely realistic for her to retire early. Um, she is going to retire early, and she's going to retire with a house fully paid for. She's going to retire with multi millions. Like, she's going to be fine. Her parents and her education and her networking and her habits financially have propelled her into success in a way that is just incredible to me. Um, I guess I'll start talking about my financial situation. I was born in the backwoods, and I was born into extreme poverty. I was born into the kind of poverty where some of the time we lived in the garage, um, a garage, not a garage to our own house, like a garage. Uh, we some of the time lived in the ghetto. We some of the time lived in trailers. We didn't really have housing stability when I was little. My parents went bankrupt 3 times by the time I was 8 years old. So I started babysitting. I started getting some money in, and by the time I was 10 years old, I had a savings account with a bank who would pay me for every A that I got in school. A little bit of extra, donated into my savings account to help me be encouraged to be a good student. And by the time I was 11, I had my own checking account and I was managing finances and budgeting. My parents did not go bankrupt again, uh, partially because I think they were sick of it, and also partially because they couldn't let their kid know more about money than them. I did it because of desperation. Unfortunately, I know what it feels like to starve. I know what it feels like to go digging around in the woods for something to eat and for my siblings. I know what it feels like to crawl around on the counters, opening cabinets and looking for even cracker crumbs in the bottom of a package, or to eat raw butter because you're so hungry. And I grew up in an extremely abusive home, and I grew up in an extremely religiously rigid home, and we were povertous, super crazy povertous, and still it was considered to be a priority to like give our money to the church. And so we didn't have new clothes, we had hand-me-downs. Our toys were like the McDonald's toys in the free boxes at yard sales. Like we were very poor. And my parents didn't know anything about money at all. And growing up, I did some odd job thingies and stuff and got some money. And then when I would get the money, I would spend it on things that would make me feel happier because I was just trying to cope with and survive the situations that I was in and get through it. But I did get some money, and some of it came from um, basically how I was born. And then some of it came from me working for it and earning it. But basically, I didn't have anyone to go to for financial advice, so my mother convinced me to put all of my savings, like 100% of it, into one single mutual fund and play the stock market that way. Like she got really convinced that the stock market was the answer, and the stock market can be a good thing, but the way that she had me do it was so bad, and basically I lost half of it. And when you only have you know, uh, like $6,000 to your name, losing more than half of it feels like an absolute blow. And when I took my money out, I had like 2,600 left, and I was like, I'm just gonna use this as seed money. And I got out of there. I left 2 days after I graduated high school. I left, and when I left, I was sleeping on a couch, and I didn't know what to do with my life. Was trying to apply for some jobs, but I didn't have anything except a high school diploma, so I went to a 2-year college and got an associate's degree in leadership, believe it or not. And thankfully, that helped me get some jobs. But when I was in college, I had to work 2 part-time jobs while maintaining straight A's in college, while also doing a full-time internship. So I was trying to help pay my way through. Thankfully, my father saved up enough that he could give each of us 6,000 toward college, and that 6,000 made the difference. Like if it wasn't for that 6,000, me working those part-time jobs wouldn't have been enough, and I still would have had to get some kind of a loan. and it would have been only for 6,000. But compounding interest is a terrible, terrible thing when it is working against you because you have debt, especially student loan debt. So I thankfully was able to graduate after 2 years with no student debt because I worked again those two part-time jobs, and my dad gave me $6,000 toward my college education. So thank you to my dad, and thank you to myself for working. But yeah, I worked really really hard, and when I left, I still had two jobs, but one became part time and one became full time, and then I eventually was able to just work one full time job at a time and carry onward. But I would basically manage to save up a little bit of money, and then not really know for sure what I was going to do with it, except that I needed it to be saved up. I grew up with constant emergencies and instability, so I expected there to be unstable things that would happen, and sure enough, my savings would get destroyed by bad situations or needing it for something. And I finally got to a point where I was working 10 to 13 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I was being pressured to move up in the company and stuff, and I was sick all the time. I was miserable. I would, during work on my breaks, go into the bathroom and just weep and cry. And during my lunch break, go out into my car, lay down in the back seat, and just curl up in a ball and cry. Like I hated my life. I hated my job. I was not doing great. And this was in my 20s. Like, I'm supposed to be, making mistakes and learning and growing, and instead I'm just still in survival mode. And so even though I taught myself some good financial habits, I taught myself to be frugal and to live within my means. I taught myself how to save. I taught myself how to use a checking account and to create budgets. Like, I was very good at being on the minimalist side of finances because I had figured that out just to survive. But I couldn't grow money for anything, and I didn't know what I was doing when it came to prospering. I had no quality of life. And I had 10 grand save up, and so I just quit my job. I tried to give 2 weeks notice, but I couldn't even make it, so I just left. And I decided to write some books, and I published them. They didn't do very good. It's fine. It was still a dream of mine, and it led me into living in extreme poverty for like a decade. And that savings depleted, but also I became a caretaker for someone 24/7, and I basically just, again, was just surviving, constantly struggling to survive. And no one ever told me that I didn't have to do that. No one ever explained it to me. I finally did a ton of therapy for other reasons, and I did enough therapy that I got to a point where I was like, life's not supposed to be this hard. It's not supposed to be like this. So in my 30s, I finally got to a point where I was like, oh, wow, like, I need to learn about this stuff because someday I would like to actually be able to take care of myself without having to be in a constant state of struggle. And when I started looking into finances, I was shocked at the things I didn't know. Um, just absolutely mind blown. When I was going to school, they didn't teach any of this stuff at all in school, like not even a little. And when I went to college, we had one class on finances, and it was essentially one I aced because most of it had to do with budgeting and, managing debt. And here I was good at savings, I was good at emergency funds, I was good at budgeting, and I had no debt. Like, I didn't believe in debt. Like, hey, I was doing great. I have a good credit score, even though I'm completely poor. Like, not a problem for me. But we did one single week on stock marketness, and basically we were split into two groups, the whole class, and one group decided to invest basically invisible, fake, imaginary money into just one stock, and they did it into Starbucks. And then the other team, my team, had three guys who decided to day trade penny stocks and then leave the writing to of it and the presentation of it to the academic kids, aka me. So I wrote the whole proposal out and all of our stuff, and I helped to do the presentation. I wish so much that I had talked to those guys about what in the world they were doing with the stock market. I have no idea. But we aced it. We won. Our team won. Congratulations to us. So yeah, I knew nothing about investments. I knew nothing about any of it. And on top of that, uh, financial stuff, sometimes there's a lot of jargon and lingo that can feel daunting because it's like learning part of another language. And it can be a hard thing to understand and comprehend if you grew up not having a consistent education. I was never in a school for more than 2 years, ever in my entire life. And I was homeschooled um, for 6 years of my education. So I had no consistency with my education, no consistency with finances. My parents did not set me up for financial success. They didn't even set them own selves up for financial success. My father, when he retired, he had his union pension from being a bricklayer his whole life and Social Security. My mom, Social Security. Like, that's it. That's all they had. They didn't have anything for retirement because they didn't know how to do that. The only thing they had is they managed to buy a house and they rent it, the house to one of my brothers. And that's that's the only other income besides Social Security and um, a union check that they get. And that's what they get to live off of for the rest of their life. And they wouldn't even have that house except I helped them to budget their money to the point where they understood that they had that much. Um, I had to go through and do a full budget with my parents, and I was trying to make it so that they could fully pay off their mortgage and retire in 2.5 years without too much change to their lifestyle. And instead, they were like, "Oh, look at all this money." They didn't pay off their mortgage. They didn't retire in 2.5 years. Instead, they bought a house. But you know what? If it worked for them, cool beans. The point is, they were not set up for financial success, and they didn't set any of us kids up for financial success. They didn't know how to. The best that they knew how to do was my dad giving me $6,000 toward college. And I am eternally grateful for that. For how ignorant about finances he was, that's amazing. Like, that's amazing. And for how poor we were our whole lives and how hard he had to work, that's amazing. Like, I'm super grateful for it. But I'm also very aware of the barrier that there is to poverty trying to grow. And I am so delayed in life. I know someone who's 25 years old and is going to be able to retire with millions. And here I am in my late 30s and I barely have anything. I was very shocked and amazed to find that anyone can open a Roth IRA. You don't have to be wealthy. You can open a Roth IRA with $50. Like, um I was like, what? Anyone can have a retirement account. According to a statistic, a study put out by the IRS, which it is a little older, so maybe it's changed, but basically 30% of the entirety of the USA population has a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA is an investment account where the money you put in is already taxed, it's already from your work. So later on in life, when you take it out, it's not taxed. There's no tax on it at all. So later on in life, you have tax-free money coming in to help you. That's amazing. And any money that it grows from that investment account is also tax-free. You can put in 6,000 in a year, and that 6,000, say it grows, another $40. whatever. It's probably going to grow way more than that. But say it grows only $40 in that year. Well, the next year you have 6,040 plus you invest another 6,000 into it. Well, now you have 12,040 that's going to grow. And so then it grows, say, another like $130. I don't know. The point is I'm giving this way kind of a low growth rate, but the point is all of the money that grows in there, when you take it out later, when you get old and you retire, it's still tax free. And no one ever told me I could have that I could do that. I had to figure it out by myself. Every single ounce and shred of financial knowledge that I have is because I tried to learn it. Since I was 8 years old, I have been trying to figure out about money and what I'm supposed to do and how I can do it in a way where I'm not just surviving, where someday maybe I can do more than just survive, more than just get by, more than have to have a roommate in order to afford rent, do more than have to go without food sometimes because my food stamps ran out. Oh well, I guess I'm gonna eat crackers for dinner. Like, go ahead and actually not have to have hand-me-downs for my clothes and have like new clothes. Go and do more than have to go out to eat and I can like pay for the tip and someone else in my family has to help pay for me because I can't afford it. Like, there's things in life that are hard and you can't help it. If the weather does something crazy and you have to get through that, or your house catches on fire, or someone gets sick and it's a medical situation, you have to just get through it, and that's hard. But life as a whole isn't meant to be as hard as it is when you're not financially knowledgeable. And my suggestion to anyone who is scared of finances, intimidated by finances, you're overwhelmed, learn about it. Even if it's just a little tiny bit, anything is better than nothing. I see a lot of videos, where people are giving recommendations for financial success, and I swear these people are doing it with people in mind who are making like more than 60 grand a year. Like, some of this advice is not applicable to people who've lived in extreme poverty. Just outright. And so I guess I'm trying to say to anyone who sees this, even if you grew up in horrifying poverty, you grew up so poor that, again, you know what it feels like to be cold, you know what it feels like to not have lights to turn on, you know what it feels like to starve. Just, even you can have a retirement account. It might be small, might not be that big, might not be much, but even you can have financial success. You don't have to live in survival mode. You don't have to stay like that forever. There is hope and there is knowledge out there, and it sucks that you have to work so hard to learn the things that someone should have told you at some point, but you didn't get the opportunity to know. But you can do it. It can happen. Invest in yourself. Invest in your knowledge. You can do it.